I brought up Christ consciousness. So now I wanted to bring up the Lucifer experiment. And this has to deal with a lot why we're experiencing the world the way it is. A lot of people always question, hey man, if there is a God, why is he letting this happen?
Right.
Right? Well, just from what I just said about Christ consciousness, we know that we are the bridge. We have to experience whatever we're experiencing here to evolve to that next level of consciousness. So we know that's part of the plan. But why and how did it happen? Let's see. So the instructions from God at the beginning of the Lucifer experiment were for humans to possess free will. But what does free will mean? Does it not mean all possibilities, both good and evil? Does it not mean that we would be allowed to do anything we wanted, with the idea from a biblical point of view that we would learn discrimination for the good? Life was given the ability to do anything it wanted, all possibilities. It was given free will. Therefore, how could free will exist unless consciousness created the format for this way of being? And who creates consciousness? The one and only God. Lucifer did not create free will, but it was through his actions and decisions that free will became a reality. It was God who created Lucifer so that free will would exist. Before the Lucifer experiment, there was no free will. All life moved according to the will of God, according to the cosmic plan. There were no deviations, and free will was only a potential that life could someday have. That's dope, huh?
It begs so many questions, because does that mean for us as human beings who resonate on our level? Because you would say that the beings that resonate on a higher frequency are more evolved than us, you know, like you just said, see more dimensions.
Right.
Are they under this same God, or you know what I mean? Or did they have to go through the Lucifer experiment to experience free choice? You know what I mean? Or is this a human condition?
Yeah.
Would be my question. Because when we use the term God, we use it loosely. Because like you just said, you brought it to a one God, you know,
right.
a creator who created consciousness. But when we use the term gods, you know, oftentimes, especially like in the times of Tahuti, there were many gods, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, and then when we even think of higher conscious beings, we almost think of them on a celestial or godly level. Like we said,
absolutely,
we could be an experiment of a alien being
Anunnaki.
That's more advanced.
Yeah,
you know what I
said
mean?
it several times. Absolutely.
So, in our estimations as humans, they're like gods to us. You see what I'm saying? So it's confusing the concept. But I still want you to keep cooking. But that's what runs through my mind when you're saying this stuff.
No, but you're right.
I'm like, man.
I'll just tell you now that you're right. There are gods, and then there is the creator.
Okay. And that's how I refer to the Most High usually, like the creator.
Exactly. Source, spirit, whatever you want to call them, but or him or her, whatever they
Right.
But there are gods. Absolutely.
Okay.
There are gods.
Okay.
And there are other creators. There are co-creators who can create universes within the universe, such as what Lucifer did.
Okay.
With this reality.
Keep cooking for the people.
You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because
but he is the creator.
Got you.
Just like EA Sports. They're creating, bro. They're creating universes. All these video games, virtual reality. They're creating universes within this universe.
Right.
So technically,
that's a good example. You know why? Because then EA Sports could have another arm. They used to have Big, and then Big would make NBA Street or NFL Street, and that's what they were over there creating.
Right.
Under EA Sports.
Absolutely.
Who's under probably, some other corporation. So yeah.
Creations within creations.
Right. Just like us. Sitting here trying to make simulations.
But obviously micro here, macro.
Right.
Real gods creating universes.
Sorry, you guys. Sometimes we go on little dives like that.
It's all good. So.
Gotta flush it out.
I love it, don't you?
Yeah, man.
At one point, because free will was possible, we realized that there was a particular way we could experience this reality that had not been tried before. So we tried it. We actually tried 3 versions of it, and each time it failed. They were absolute disasters. The latest experiment and 4th attempt, with Lucifer heading it, used a different approach to create free will. This time, God chose an area of consciousness that was just above human existence. This experiment began with the angels. So it was the angels who brought this new free will consciousness to mankind to be lived here in these dense worlds, and life everywhere watched to see how it would fare. With great respect between 2 brothers, the battle between good and evil began. It was a battle to the death, yet neither could die.
Was it Inky and then Lil? I'm just playing, bro. I'm just
no,
playing.
In this one, but think about it, how that references everyone though. Right? Like in the you have Enlil and Inky, you have all these different brothers going against each other. In this one, it's actually
even remember the story I just brought up of the egg. Their story had Inlinky and Il a brother too.
Yeah,
because that's why I brought up Inlinky and Il.
Yep, that's right.
Was that Nigeria?
There was the Dogon. No,
it was Nigeria, I think.
It might have been. Yeah, I remember. We were talking about.
Because I said Credo Mutwa.
Him.
Yeah.
We were talking about him. Yeah. So that's crazy, right? There was three attempts at free will prior to this, and they were all disasters. They resulted in. I'll get to it later, but I'll go ahead and tell you now. One of the leftover disasters from the last experiment is Mars. That's why Mars is a fucking dead planet. Because of the last experiment. Planets were fucking annihilated.
Interesting.
That's how bad the experiment went with free will, the last one. So I'll get to
that.
that.
Where we're headed?
Let's hope
they
not.
They want you to think that.
So
way they push it.
Where did I leave off? It was a battle to the death. It was a battle that had to be, for it was the will of God for the overall sake of the universe. Michael supported the side of the light and good, and Lucifer backed the side of darkness and evil. A new possibility was about to be lived, and we humans thought it was a great idea, this idea of free will. The bright and shining one, it becomes clear in the study of sacred geometry that nothing was created without intention and reason. It wasn't just a mistake. In fact, there are no mistakes. And when God created Lucifer, as you can read in the Bible, he was the most magnificent angel God had ever created. He was the most intelligent, the most beautiful, the most amazing of all angels. He had no peer. He was the top of the line model of the angelic worlds.
That's why when I say people who are very charming are deceiving, because Lucifer was such. They didn't say charming. They pretty much described charming.
Exactly.
Though. Beautiful.
Absolutely. Charismatic.
Suave, yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
God gave him the name Lucifer, meaning the bright and shining one. God gave him this name. So do you think God made a mistake? If you think back to our own human nature, we always tend to look to our heroes as that which we want to become.
There's that word.
We look up to those people who have gone before us, who have blazed the trail in the direction we feel we want to go. And we model much of our behavior after our heroes.
That's true.
Because of the understanding of as above, so below.
So below.
It is the same for Lucifer. He wanted to be like his heroes, but he didn't have anyone higher than himself in his realm. He didn't have any heroes. He was the greatest archangel in creation. The only hero he had was God, who was the only being beyond him from where he could see. So Lucifer did something very natural. He wanted to actually be God from a creation level. There's nothing wrong with merging with God, but that isn't exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to be just like God. In fact, he wanted to be even better than God. Lucifer wanted to surpass his hero.
I wanted to say they should make a movie about this, but they have. This is what all the movies are about.
Right, pretty much.
Go ahead.
Lucifer was so intelligent that he knew how the universe was created. He knew the images, the patterns, and the codes that had created the universe. But in order to be greater than God, he decided that he would have to separate from God. As long as he was part of God, he could not go beyond him. So evidently, with God's blessing, Lucifer started on a great experiment to see what could be learned by creating in a different way from how spirit had made the original creation.
So this was God's plan all along. Then. It had to be.
Yeah, God created free will. He created Lucifer to give us free will.
Right.
He severed the love bonds between himself and God and created a Merkabah field that was not based on love, because once he severed the love between himself and God, he could no longer make a living Merkabah. Archangel Lucifer and many other angels started on this great experiment to see what could be learned in this new way.
You can see why people with this train of thought, though, don't have a problem with worshiping Lucifer.
Exactly.
Because in their estimations, we don't have free will without Lucifer.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Go ahead.
So they create the false duality as opposed to the natural polarity. There is a natural polarity within man,
Right.
but they create a perverted duality.
Got you. A synthetic
Exactly.
version of the...
Exactly.
Just like that's the MO.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what duality is.
Got you.
Polarity is natural and duality is manufactured. As we said, similar experiments had actually been tried 3 times before by other beings, but those experiments had ended in massive destruction and pain for everyone involved. Many planets had been completely destroyed, including one in our own solar system, Mars. But Lucifer was retrying this old experiment with a new method. So he severed the love bonds between himself and God.
Was Lucifer in charge of those other projects that failed?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
And created a Merkabah field that was not based on love.
How did God fail, though? Go ahead, sorry.
He probably put other people in charge.
So
Just like he did Lucifer. Here.
So the angels have free will, which in turn gives us free will.
Free will exists as a potential for everything to have. It's just whether or not some sort of interface, if you will, gives it to you. It's an intermediary, because God doesn't give it to people or creations directly for whatever reason.
Go ahead.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I just don't want to get us too off track.
No, it's all
with
good.
My random thoughts.
What he did was make an interdimensional time-space machine that we call a spaceship. This flying object, sometimes seen as a flying saucer, but also many other shapes, was more than just a vehicle as we think of it. Much more. It not only could move throughout the spectrum of this multi-dimensional reality, but it could create realities that seem to be just as real as the original creation. It is similar to what we are now calling virtual reality, only this was a virtual reality that could not be distinguished from the real thing.
I know what they're talking about. They're talking about those lands that populate as you move. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's how some people think of our reality.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, like, things exist because we are here to appreciate them. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, if there's, I think this is what you're saying. So let's say there's the top layer of soil.
Mm-hmm.
Is what's underneath there really there, or only visible because when we dig it up, we then see it?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Does a tree fall in the woods? Does
Exactly.
anybody hear it type shit? Yeah.
Exactly. So Lucifer made this synthetic Merkabah to create a reality separate from God so that he could ascend to the heights and be just as good as God, at least in his own mind. He couldn't be God, but he could be like God, his hero. In order to convince other angels that this experiment was necessary, he chose a different pathway out of the great void to create his synthetic reality that was unique unto itself. In the Garden of Eden, there were 2 trees, the tree of life, which led to eternal life, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In the Genesis pattern of creation, as seen in the flower of life, you guys remember the Genesis pattern? A few pods back, we went over it. Check that one out. One of the clips we got up is Sacred Geometry, the story of creation. You can see it there.
Boom.
So, in the Genesis pattern of creation, as seen in the flower of life, the pathway that Spirit took coming up to the top of the original sphere of creation was associated with the first tree, the tree of life. Spirit came from a single point in the center of the first sphere and began to rotate in a vortex, creating the images and created the reality that leads to eternal life. The tree of life and the flower of life are of the same creation, but there is another way that Spirit can exit the great void, and it is associated with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It is actually the same geometry, except that it has a different view of the geometry. In other words, there's another path to follow in sacred geometry to exit the great void and create a reality that appears the same, but is geometrically and experientially different. Lucifer knew this, and he chose that pathway to create a new kind of reality in which he could control. So think about it. It's
Sounds
the same.
like a black hole.
It's the same, but geometrically different. So we talk about vibrating into the next level of consciousness, where possibly, right, the sphere becomes a plane. We talked about how with the fourth dimensional view, it now becomes a plane. Did I tell you about that?
I don't know. We talked about how it's flat at the top and the bottom of the poles.
Okay. Well, when you look at a sphere, a 3D sphere, so the next level would be 4D, right? So the next level of consciousness for us would be Christ consciousness. Let's assume that the 4D would be the same for the sphere. When you put it into 4D, it becomes a flat plane. So therefore, if we're vibrating high enough and evolve, right, eventually to Christ consciousness, we then may see Earth as a flat plane. So therefore, when people are like, yeah, the Earth is flat, perhaps those people have vibrated. Maybe are they in a limbo between the two? Maybe they just are higher vibrational beings, and they see the Earth for what it really is.
Interesting.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So
Which is also interesting because we at one time as humans, according to some, saw the Earth and the geometry of the Earth as a flat plane.
Right.
And then we changed to seeing it as a sphere. So it's almost like humanity has, if we follow that logic, has been taken down a level. And me and you have talked about that too when I brought up, the flaws in evolution and things like of that nature. And I told people evolution doesn't just go one way.
Right.
You have it mistaken, because that's to get you to think that primitive people were Neanderthals and he was a racist who just wanted you to think that today's things are the best because this is the time when, people of his hue and his, that are in his favor are in power,
Right.
So that's what his whole agenda was. So
Right.
yeah, it's interesting though, but
So
there we go. That's our stuff right there.
So
homie.
creating a dualistic reality, Lucifer convinced a third of the angels in heaven to go with him to support him in this new reality.
Who's coming with me?
He convinced them because his particular pathway out of the great void resulted in a unique viewpoint that had not yet been lived or explored. From their angelic viewpoint of reality, it was a possibility of life, and someone needed to live it. It's crazy, right? Like, this is a possibility, we got to try it. Almost like scientists.
So when we talk about ourselves being spiritual beings in a human body, we literally could be those spiritual beings that said someone's got to live this life.
Right.
Like you're saying right there.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Important to at least the angels who followed Lucifer, this new pathway also contained a system of knowledge that was able to give an experience that had never been fully lived before in the original reality of God. This experience centered around two pieces of geometric knowledge, rather simple pieces too, it would seem. These two geometric forms were primal knowledge about the egg of life and the source of all living forms. The first sphere they were seeking fits in the center of the egg of life and touches all 8 spheres. The second sphere fits perfectly inside any of the 6 holes in the center of each of the face of the egg of life. This knowledge had always been known, but from within the original reality, it was not possible to actually live and experience it. Remember, all sacred geometry has an experiential aspect. The diamond view, a square turned 45 degrees, shows the Luciferian geometry of these two spheres. Lucifer told the angelic world that we needed to do this experiment because the universe had missing information, and the only way to get the information was to live it. So he chose this particular view of geometry in which to start his new separate reality creation. Through this new geometry, he interpreted his creation in a new way. This gave the experience of being inside a life form separate from the rest of reality. Many believe it was a quest for the experience of greatness, and most important, that it was new. There was hardly ever anything new in creation. The way of Lucifer was the diamond view of the egg of life, the same dimensional view that humanity happens to be living at this moment in history. So if you see a square, and you guys at home, I showed you the slide, so you saw, you see the square, and then you turn it diamond, right? Mm-hmm. Well, with the egg of life, if you turn it from a 90-degree view to the 45-degree view, mm-hmm. that's the angle in which he chose to leave the void. And by doing so and creating this new reality, this is what he was able to, like a parallel universe. So, remember, it says, yes, humans did follow Lucifer. Remember, out of 5 possible levels, the Earth is now living in the 3 levels of consciousness, and how we had to rotate the second level of consciousness 45 degrees to the diamond view to get it to the point to the next level, Christ consciousness. Remember we talked about that earlier? We turned it 45 degrees. Mm-hmm. He turned it 45 degrees as well. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't the egg of life that we turned for Christ consciousness. It was the view of the 9 concentric circles that Tahuti mm-hmm. had. So this is something different, but still there's something to changing the angles of geometric patterns and their effect on reality. So, anyways, Lucifer chose the square view, then turned it 45 degrees to the diamond view. It was this view of the egg of life he wanted to obtain because this view was the one that was needed to experience both the inner and outer spheres that would fit into those openings we spoke of. The seemingly innocent need for this information from this view on an experiential level was of huge importance to the angels. This was a possibility that just might work. And it was a possibility that had never been lived before. The trick to this new reality was that spirit can separate itself. It can be in 2 or more places at one time. It is very much like cell division or mitosis, except without form. It is what makes mitosis possible in the first place. So the new reality was created with the same sacred geometry as the flower of life, except that spirit divided itself into 2 and began to rotate out of the great void in a double helix pattern from 2 completely different centers. This created the new reality. In addition, Lucifer used the diamond view of the egg of life, turning it 90 degrees to the rectangular view in order to focus the new untried consciousness through it. It became the lens through which we interpreted the new reality. This was revolutionary. That's fascinating, brother.
It is.
It's phenomenal. So, in creating the original reality on the first day of creation, at the first motion of the Spirit of God, Spirit moved itself to the top of the first sphere. Then we started the rotating pattern which began creation. But there's another way to enter creation where Spirit would leave part of itself at the very first center. In other words, at the very first instant of the motion away from center, which is the very first moment that creation begins, Spirit would divide itself in 2 and leave part of itself in the center and move the other part of itself to the top of the first sphere. Then it would create the next sphere at the top of the first sphere the same way as in the other creations. But from then on, the next motion on the second day of Genesis, Spirit begins a double rotation motion where the center half of Spirit rotates over one way and the top half of Spirit rotates over the other way and forms the 2 spheres, which makes this pattern. From there, it divides itself again to create yet another pattern, and then begins a pattern of dividing and coming together. But it is primarily division, separating from oneself, as opposed to the original geometry, which is more about connecting. Mm. But in order to do this, you have to separate most of the lines. You understand?
Yeah. I overstand.
All right.
Understand.
It expands into yet another geometrical pattern, then continues outward. This can keep going on and on and on, and eventually you end up with exactly the same grid as the flower of life, the same laws, the same apparent reality, the same planets and suns and trees and bodies. Everything's the same, except for one huge difference. The flower of life pattern has a single geometric center, one eye, and a being who enters creation this way is connected directly to all life and to God. But Lucifer's pattern has not a single geometric center, but 2 eyes. No matter how big the grid is, when you come back to its center, you'll find 2 centers or eyes. And it's been separated from God. There is no love. These angels of Lucifer have almost forgotten what love is. Remember what Jesus said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Right? So that's what he's talking about. There's 2 eyes in Lucifer's flower of life. There's 1 in God's. If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Let me see what I got here. Okay, so
Look at the Tahuti hat.
oh yeah,
That's
the one
circle
you
I
were
was
rocking
talking about on the side. I was looking at it as you were talking. I was like, look at that. I ain't even pointed out to the people.
yeah, for sure,
I
brother.
doubt many people caught it either. 'Cause
Yeah,
you can't see it from the side.
yeah, it's the flower of life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's deep though, that what you just broke down,
Yeah.
because coming back to center as opposed to going away from source. Because
Right.
that's what I've spoken of, and me and you have both spoken of, is how far we have fallen from source. And it almost feels as if humanity doesn't even know anymore who they are, how to get back to source.
Right.
Even if they want to get back to source, they don't even, some people don't even know that they're lost. They just feel it. They feel the anxiety. They feel the effects of it, but they have no clue what happened to them.
So many people in this country always say, "United we stand, divided we fall," and they don't understand how powerful that really is. Right? Those are just the words. We're talking about the actual spirit behind it.
Right. Yeah, that's cool, man.
So, again, I love so now. That's our thing. So, shouldn't have put it out there, bro. That's it. It's done. God created this. God created this situation. It wasn't Lucifer. God created Lucifer and knew what Lucifer was going to do.
Right.
So there's indeed a reason for creating the separate reality. Lucifer began this new reality shortly before humans came into existence as a race, and we have become the key players. The purpose behind this Luciferian experiment is now coming to fruition on Earth, as Earth has been chosen as the place to give life new birth. It has become clear throughout the cosmos that the Earth has become the focus of this intense drama, and it appears as though the fruition of this experiment is about to unfold before our very eyes. We are all players who take this new reality and transform it in the direction of the ultimate purpose. We are to go beyond anything archangels Lucifer and Michael had imagined. We are to be the children of the third way, a new reality born from the first 2. We here on Earth are all part of this Luciferian experiment. All of us have chosen this path. Every one of us on this planet has chosen this way, whether you want to be identified with it or not. You chose this because you are here. Our physical mother, the Nephilim, are also part of the Lucifer experiment, as is our physical father, the Syrians.
Now you're getting to some of the shit I was asking about.
Though the Syrians have almost totally extracted themselves. The race from Sirius B, the dolphins, were also part of the Lucifer experiment. The dolphins were the extraterrestrial race which visited the Dogons and imparted knowledge of the universe to them. They had small, hard-shelled vehicles which they used for interdimensional travel, but they gave this way of life up over 200 years ago and have made an incredible transformation back to unity with Source. Reverting back to a no-technology world, as found in the original reality, seems to be the answer. How many times have we talked about that?
Yep.
Technology is spitting in our divinity's face. Everything that we can do, everything that I'm doing right now, all this technical stuff, even the lights, we could do that ourselves. Literally, like, not just like hang the lights ourselves, but you know what I'm saying. Fucking light up. Walk through walls, do whatever the hell we want. But look what they've done to us. Diet and shit they're spraying on us, and symbols all over. You're driving around, gas stations have all these crazy symbols, and a lot of people think that there's nothing wrong. Oh, those are just symbols, No, those symbols have magical properties.
Bro, they get us from in the womb.
Yes.
This shit's done to you before you're even
Prenatal vitamins.
Before you're even here.
Prenatal
man.
vitamins. God only knows what's in that shit. Oh, make sure you take all these. Why they weren't doing that back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Kids seem pretty cool. I don't know. I like the Cowboys. Right? Mm-hmm. You like them. Look at your fucking hat. Mm-hmm. You look sick right now, dog.
Thanks, man.
I love that shit.
You know what I thought about, too, when you're talking about the spectrums and how he turned it to a degree? Like kaleidoscopes and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because as kids, those are very interesting to you. Because, you know, as kids,
those
your
are
mind's
phenomenal.
still free and open. Again.
Oh, yeah.
And then you see those colors and the spectrum. And then when you get older, you realize that all of our understanding and what we take in is just light spectrum.
Right.
You know, and an array of colors and how colors reflect off of things and how our eyes, pupils take it in, you know, and our brain breaks it down.
Absolutely.
So it goes into exactly what you said, walking through walls and shit. Like, you got to be able to see beyond, but we only are conditioned to see physical.
Right.
So we've been taken away from our divinity, like you said.
Absolutely.
And
led astray.
Yes, it's the technology, but it's so much bigger than that.
Absolutely.
They take the minds of the people.
The technology is just to spit in God's face.
Yeah, the technology helps further along the agenda. But yeah, this has been in place for a long time.
For sure. Obviously. That's what we're talking about right now. It's getting crazy right now. It's getting crazier. If you didn't think it could get crazier, it is. So, using intellect without love is how Lucifer convinced the angels that we really needed to experience this new way. What happened to these angels? They severed their love connection with God, with all life, and functioned on one side of their brain, not on both. They functioned only with intelligence, not love. This has created races of beings that were incredibly intelligent but had no experience of love or compassion, like the Greys or the Martians. In the past, this always resulted in their fighting each other, sending life into chaos. This is where Mars comes in. Mars was one of those races, not of the Lucifer experiment, but the one before that was terminated almost 1 million years ago. At that time, life was destroying itself everywhere and Mars fell victim. The planet was constantly at war, constantly fighting because there was no love or compassion. Then at one point, they destroyed their atmosphere and all life on the planet perished. However, prior to the extinction of Mars, there were certain people who knew that destruction was inevitable. Those were the Martians who came to Earth and settled in Atlantis, causing all the Merkaba troubles here on our planet. You know, they talk about the fall of Atlantis. Mm-hmm. That's what's saying this is what happened. The Martians knew they were doomed. They left. They came down here, fucked shit up down here. Mm-hmm. And that's possibly what's happening now. Possibly could have been what set off the deluge, the great deluge. I have no idea. But anyways, the result of this Lucifer experiment was that the Lucifer beings created physical ships and focused on technology, creating an entire technologically based system and a separate reality from the original reality, whereas the beings who did not separate from God had absolutely no technology whatsoever. Then the war of opposites began. Archangel Michael, the angel of light, and Archangel Lucifer, the angel of darkness, began the cosmic war of duality that created our good and evil, dualistic consciousness. Archangel Michael and the angels of light have living Merkaba fields that can do anything that Luciferian technology can do and even more. And Archangel Lucifer and his angels of darkness have their technological Merkabas and their synthetic reality. So we possess two totally different approaches to life. Look at Archangels Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. They don't have technology. They don't use spaceships. They live in light bodies, and their reality, the original reality, is based on light. It is what could be called light technology based on love. Then there's this other way, Lucifer's way, where you have all these material items to be concerned with. We have our houses and cars and all the things we feel we need. The whole web we're in is Luciferian technology. You can look out at the world and see the difference between nature, the original reality, and what mankind has done with the separate reality created by the knowledge of Lucifer. There's an entire spectrum of engagement with this experiment. We've talked about that. We were just talking about it. I'm going to wrap it up with this. We have both aspects. Although we followed the Luciferian path, we have the original reality potential still within us. An important understanding is that we Earthlings are finding the universal answer in a totally unique way that's never been seen before. This entire battle between the original reality and the Luciferian reality seems to be leading to a third way of existence that is some kind of combination of the first two. If you cross your eyes when you look at the two eyes drawing, you may see the third way when you see three eyes. Then the middle path becomes a combination of both. You're actually seeing both of them superimposed over each other. View this figure as a stereogram and you'll see that it creates a third, unique pattern. This new third way is the hope of all life everywhere. The universe has been at war for thousands of years. The battle between the dark and the light with no apparent solution. Now it appears the struggle is going to culminate in a new birth, a third reality.
Kush and Chemtrails, the world's most dangerous podcast.